Video is showing that this is period 5. This is the second part of our lesson on genes and DNA. And so we're starting here on mutations. All right, mutations are really important for you to understand. And we're going to put this first one up here. It defines the change in the DNA sequence that can be harmful, helpful, or make no difference. Find that answer on 23's mutations. Now, I want you to understand that mutations are extremely important for evolutionary theory. And I think it's extremely important for us as creationists, we'll do creationist theory, that we understand so we can help give answers to evolutionary theory. So, defined as a change in the DNA sequence. We'll continue on. It's physical or chemical agents that cause mutations in DNA are called mutagens. That's the answer to number 7. Mutagens. Examples of mutagens. Here are a few of them you can write down. High energy radiation. This would be like nuclear radiation. For example, remember the huge tsunami that happened in Japan? Hit that nuclear power plant, and radiation has affected it because it was released. Probably the most dangerous to the most people is ultraviolet radiation from the sunlight. That's why when we're out in the sun a lot, what should we be wearing?
Sunscreen.
Sunscreen, yes. That is why, ladies, you don't need that beautiful tan, quotation mark, and go to the tanning booths and get radiated with a mutagen, which is ultraviolet radiation. So I know it's hard for some people not to do, but that is really important. And you will not regret it when you get older. When I was young, I didn't even think about sunscreen. I was an outdoor person all the time. So I had to have some of those spots on my face taken care of because I had too much mutagens on me. Okay, yes?
Can you get cancer from that?
Yeah, you can get cancer from that. But that's the whole idea from taking them off so it doesn't. You don't want to get skin cancer, all right? That's the main thing that radiation does. Yeah, some of it can be very serious. Some of it isn't as serious, but still you got to get it removed. Okay, cigarette smoke has mutagens in it.
Do you want to start that?
No, that was the example, you just need to. Mutations in DNA are called mutagens again. If a mutation occurs in sex cells, the results could be passed on to the next generation. Now understand, mutagens can cause changes in cells like ultraviolet radiation on your skin, and that can turn into cancer, and it's just affecting you. Or in lungs, if you're smoking, you get lung cancer. If a mutation occurs in the sex cell, all right, remember, both parents are contributing, whether it's plant, animal, humans, whatever, they're contributing genes, and the offspring will carry those characteristics. Now, if one of those mutations occur on the sex cell, that could be passed on to the offspring. All right, and this is what evolutionists say, how things change. How you become goo to you. In other words, the Darwinian evolution. They say this result of this mutation was a benefit to the offspring, and so that offspring ultimately, it was the fittest, it survived, and it ultimately passed that down, so pretty soon all of that species has that change. But you do many millions of these things actually until finally it changes into a totally new organism, which we see as impossible. What was your question?
Oh, I was going to ask if we were going to...
We'll eventually get everything, okay? I promise you, not today, we'll get it right before we do our activity tomorrow. All right, types of mutations. You have deletion. The base pair is removed. All right? And I'm going to show you pictures so we'll see it. So just, you have insertion, base pair is added, and substitution, the base pair is replaced. We find that in your science book, and I'll show it to you up here. You have this on page 94, but it's kind of nice for us as a class to look at this together. And I'll just switch this over here. It should pop up. Zoom in. Oops, zoom in. All right. So here's the original sequence on the gene. So these are the base pairs. Remember, adenosine, and you've got all those base pairs. We'll go over all those again. But here's one where, see this one, C and G? It is replaced with A and T. That is a mutation by replacing a base pair. And that could affect the offspring. Here's a base pair where it's added. So it is plain added an extra A and a T. See this is the number? See how there's one added? See this a little bit longer? Got that? And then another kind of mutation, the base pair is deleted, removed. See how this is one short? It's totally, that one's totally taken out. So that's how different mutations can occur. Go back to computer, and we'll move on. All right. So I showed you the book instead of the whiteboard. Example is sickle cell disease. It's caused by a substitution. That's the answer to 29. Sickle cell is caused by a substitution. And we will go to the interactive whiteboard to show you that. Go to the next thing down here. Let's get it up to 150. Probably be good. This up a little higher. Okay, so sickle cell is going to affect the shape of the blood cell. Red blood cells, a nice little circle like that. That's a red blood cell. And these are your codons, the three parts of the DNA that tell you what kind of amino acid to make. So this makes this type of amino acids. 309, this is proline, these three. This is glutamic acid, these three are, etc. Well, with sickle cell anemia, the glutamic acid, there's a substitution, it's replaced. This substitution, notice there's A and T, and then you have this one right here, which is A, and it is replaced with T. And so you have valine, which is going to affect the shape of the cell. All right? And so people with sickle cell anemia is a pretty serious disease. You're likely to have transplant or transfusions. Yes?
Yeah, my mom's friend's son has that.
Sickle cell anemia? Right.
Awful, like
it only affects people with an African ancestry.
Yeah.
So, we actually have a video clip I'm going to show you on that. All right? So we're going to switch again. Lots of switching to the video. All right. And it will explain that. Let me get the menu up. An unusual mutation.
They say for every rule, there's an exception. In genetics, it might be better said, mistakes are rare, but they do occur. Genetic mistakes are called mutations. Dutch botanist Hugo de Vries discovered and named mutations in 1886 while working with evening primroses. He found that every once in a while, a new variation appeared. A variation that could not be explained by the laws of genetics. De Vries called these unexplained variations mutations. Mutations are changes in a gene or chromosome that affect the way traits are inherited. A mutation can be helpful, neutral, or harmful, depending on how it affects the organism's ability to survive in its environment. An unusual mutation is the gene mutation that causes sickle cell anemia, a serious blood disease. This mutation can be both helpful and harmful. In the case of sickle cell anemia, the protein whose production is controlled by the mutant gene contains an error in its structure. Since this protein happens to be a vital one, the consequences are very serious. The protein is hemoglobin, the molecule in red blood cells that carries oxygen to all the cells of the body. There is one small difference between the gene for sickle cell hemoglobin and the gene for normal hemoglobin. This small difference results in sickle-shaped blood cells in the blood of people with the disease. People with sickle cell anemia have inherited one sickle cell gene from each parent. When this happens, the sickle-shaped blood cells clog capillaries and lower oxygen levels. Only immediate medical attention can save a person in sickle cell crisis. What seems strange about the mutation is that up to 40% of the people in some parts of Africa are carriers of the sickle cell gene. They have one normal gene and one sickle cell gene. Why hasn't the gene for sickle cell anemia been eliminated by natural selection?
Okay, we're going to find the answer in a minute. We'll let them tell us.
A clue to this puzzle came from maps showing sickle cell distribution to be most common in a region of Africa called the Malaria Belt. Another interesting clue in this puzzle is the fate of the early European explorers in Africa. Many died from malaria. Why?
Is it scratch?
Find out in a minute.
No. It just.
Then it was discovered that a person carrying one sickle cell gene and one normal gene.
Okay, let's just look at this. Here's the parents. These are carriers, aren't they? All right? This is normal. This is sickle cell anemia. Now remember, this is X-linked gene, so will this person have sickle cell anemia? No, because they are just what?
Carrier.
A carrier. So is this parent. All right, now look at the offspring. Remember we studied this? All right, so this person has totally normal blood, does not have sickle cell carrier. This one's a carrier, isn't it? Okay, this is the female, this is the female, this is a carrier. And this here is a carrier as well. But guess what? This person has the disease. Okay, I wanted to just point that out. We'll continue on.
Had a better chance of surviving malaria. So the sickle cell trait probably evolved as a mutation that gave an advantage to people who lived where malaria was common. Because of this advantage, it was favored by natural selection. The European explorers did not have this mutated gene to protect them from malaria. In Africa today, when a child goes to a clinic sick with malaria, one of the first things the doctors do is check to see if the child is a sickle cell carrier. If the child carries the gene for sickle cell anemia, he or she has a good chance of surviving malaria. It's important to note that mutations can occur accidentally or spontaneously, or they can be caused by environmental factors. These factors, like radiation and certain chemicals, are called mutagens. While mutagens can be harmful, skin cancer caused by ultraviolet radiation comes to mind, mutagens can also be useful. Scientists, for example, used radiation to sterilize Mediterranean fruit flies that were causing extensive crop damage in California. Mutations are rare and unpredictable, so much so that it's impossible to know when or if they'll happen. About all you can say is, nobody's perfect, not even Mother Nature.
Okay, so I'll put that back on the menu. And we'll switch back over to the computer. Now I wanted to just kind of discuss that a little bit briefly. They kind of talk as if it is showing evolution. Well, it is in a sense, evolution just means change, but what has happened is those people that were carriers, they had a more likely chance to survive, didn't they? The ones that had sickle cell anemia, they probably ultimately just died. So you ended up with all this genetic strength against malaria in that African belt there. When the Europeans came, they didn't have any advantage at all in their blood, did they? So that's why so many died. It's not a shining example of Darwinian evolution. It is an example of survival of the fittest, though. It is in that sense. All right, so results of mutations. You need to write these down, just on the back of that sheet or whatever, anywhere. Because I asked this question on your homework check. So results of mutations. There's 3 results. We already kind of alluded to it.
Write this on the back.
Wherever you want, as long as you have it for your notes tomorrow, okay? Most mutations have no effect. They really don't affect anything. We all have mutations, it just hasn't affected us. Okay? A few mutations are harmful. There's some that just are not good. All right, and lastly, is a little bit longer. Mutations that are of benefit, because there are a few that are benefit, are extremely rare, and usually only in less complex organisms, like fruit flies, bacteria, or what have you. It might benefit them. A bacteria might become resistant, have a mutation that makes it to be resistant to an antibiotic. Well, that's to that bacteria's advantage, isn't it? Those are very simple organisms. And it's still bacteria, by the way. It's not another organism. Everybody got it down?
Yeah.
Wait a few minutes. I see. Okay, looks like everybody's done. All right, now, important to remember that mutations result in loss or change of genetic information. You either lose it or it's changed.
You need to write that down.
No, you don't need to write this down. Not the addition of new information. No exceptions. It's always mutations result from loss or change of genetic information. This is contrary to evolution, which absolutely requires additional genetic information. And we don't see that in nature. So, important to understand that. Well, let's just get some other information, and this will finish off our sheet here, okay? Genetic engineering. You need to know a little bit about that. GMO, genetic modified, whatever that is, something, I don't know. You always hear about it, everybody's against it. Manipulating individual genes within an organism. That's what genetic engineering is, number 30. So that's humans manipulating those genes. Examples are insulin from bacteria. In fact, to get insulin, which is needed for people who have diabetes and it's a blood sugar level problem, we'll talk about it later, but it used to be pretty expensive to get insulin because it was quite a process to get it. But because of genetic engineering, they were able to put a gene in bacteria that cause that bacteria to produce insulin. So now it can be made rather cheaply. JW, a
So
question.
What would the answer to number 30 be?
Genetic engineering.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, examples of this are genetic, well, disease, okay, this is an example, is insulin from bacteria and disease-resistant plants. Remember, we couldn't do genetic, or the only possibility for you to have genetic resistant banana trees is to do genetic engineering. People are really opposed to that because they think you're altering nature. So there's a lot of debate whether that's good or bad. So, okay, so the other thing we do with genetic identification, which has been made popular with shows like CSI, and that's DNA fingerprinting. used to identify who committed a crime. So, in the old days, they just took fingerprints and they matched them to different people's fingerprints. But now, we can actually take DNA. DNA is a better, in a sense, fingerprint of who a person is than anything. Because everybody has different DNA, except for one exception, that's identical twins, which that's our next one. Only identical twins have truly identical DNA. I was in the news earlier this year. Must have had a really rotten twin brother because he committed some crimes and it got blamed on his brother because the DNA evidence fit his brother, didn't it? And later, though, he confessed that he did it. That's the case with that. A scientifically created organism that has an exact copy of another organism's genes is called a clone. Dolly the sheep is the famous clone, one of the first cloned mammals. Yes?
So it's 31.
34.
31.
Is it 31?
I mean, no, what's 31?
I haven't got to it yet. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, we'll get back to that in a minute. Let me finish this, okay? All right. Well, we just did finish. All right, yeah, okay, let's make sure we have. Anybody else missing anything? 31. Now, there's one that you have to figure out from your chart. I'm going to let you do that. This chart right here, put the following steps to making protein. You should be an expert on that now. Use your chart if you have to. All right? Yes.
I just did.
Okay, we could be, we'll go ahead and turn the video off. So, yeah.